You won't get jacked just by chasing progressive overload. From over a decade of training myself and others, I found out there's only 4 simple things you'll ever need to build muscle. So in this video, I'm going to show you the exact system that'll blow up your physique so fast that people think you're using steroids, and you don't even have to waste money on supplements. It is this system that got me from 67 to 85 kilos. It helped Nico enter a bodybuilding photo shoot at age 44, and it got Michael to his best ever shape in just 8 weeks. And I noticed that most guys struggle to build muscle because they don't understand this one curve that I'm about to show you. But if you get this right, muscle growth becomes so simple, everyone can get jacked. And it looks like this. So here on this side, you have the level of fitness or performance. And then on this side, you have the time that passes. And this is your baseline, your current level of strength and muscle. Every time we do strength exercises, initially you create stress and fatigue. So you drop below that baseline. And in response to that, your body kicks off a whole series of processes to recover. And here's where it gets really interesting. If your recovery matches your training, you won't just go back to baseline, you go above it. And that's what we call supercompensation. And it simply means that you get fitter, stronger, more muscular. Now, this entire supercompensation process is controlled by just 4 things. And the system I'm about to show you now is built exactly around those things. I call it the IRON method, which stands for intensity, recovery, overload, and nutrition. Get all 4 working together and muscle growth starts happening almost automatically. But if you miss just even one of them, muscle growth will be slow and painful. So let me show you each part of the system, starting with intensity, because this is the lever that determines whether your muscles even have a reason to grow in the first place. Now, intensity comes down to 3 things: your technique, how close you train to failure, and how many sets you're doing per week. And we're starting with the one that makes or breaks everything else. Because it's easy to get lost in tier lists, Reddit threads, YouTube videos, trying to find the best exercise. And I get it. It feels like the right thing to do, but it's not. It's avoiding the real problem. Take a look at this clip from my client Richie doing a lat pull down. See, on first glance it looks quite solid, probably like you see most guys do them. But watch closely, because what I'm about to point out, most guys never even notice. The first thing is arm position. His grip is a little bit too wide here. A wide grip like this decreases your leverage, which basically means you can move less weight, and so you apply less stimulus to the muscle. If you bring in the grip so that the wrists stack on top of the elbow, you get stronger, and your lat can go through the full range of motion. Second is elbow positioning. See how Richie's elbows are flaring out here? If you point them slightly forward, it matches the lat's natural pull direction, and it lets the elbow come closer to your body at the bottom. See, it's small tweaks like this that make exercises so much more effective. And your muscles don't know which exercises you're doing. All they do is respond to tension that's put on those muscles. So before you worry about which exercises to do, we need to make sure we're doing them right in the first place. Now, obviously, I can't go into every single exercise in this video, so if you want me to review your technique, you can submit your training video in the link in the description, and I may review yours in one of my next videos. Now, while having perfect technique is the foundation, on its own, it won't build muscle. And I see this all the time reviewing training footage of my clients. They think they're training hard, but in reality, they're not. Let's take a look at this video from one of my subscribers, Dimitri's, and this is probably one of the best squats I've seen. While it looks great, he could have gotten so much more stimulus out of it. See how his last reps looks almost the same as the first? That's a telltale sign that we're at least 3 reps away from failure. Because in practice, getting close to failure means that the speed of the bar is slowing down significantly, as you can see in this clip right here. So how can you apply this? The easiest option is to film your set and compare the first and the last reps. If the speed looks the same, you're simply not training hard enough. Okay, so now we're training with great technique and intensity is dialed in. The next piece of the puzzle puts this together to really maximize your muscle growth. And most guys think that training more means more muscle. So when muscle growth doesn't happen as fast as they want, they add another set, another exercise, or even another session. And when that doesn't have the effect they expect, they add even more. But that's not how muscle growth works. When I landed the job at Google a few years ago, I got so busy that training 5 days a week became 3. At first I tried to force extra sessions in, and I felt terrible every time I missed one. Honestly, I was convinced I was about to lose every gram of muscle I'd spent years on building. But the truth is, I couldn't keep up. So I had to accept that 3 days a week is just what I could stick to. And I know that a lot of you guys face this as well, whether it's your job, your family, or your social life. So I adjusted my program and routine, and during one of the busiest, most exhausting periods of my life, I kept and even improved what I'd built training 5 days a week with all the time in the world. That's when I realized that forcing 5 days a week into a life that couldn't support it would just wreck my progress. Because without recovery, your body won't be able to turn that stimulus into supercompensation. And what I realized is that it's not the number of sessions per week I was doing, it was the total amount of quality work I was doing for each muscle group across the week. Now for most muscle groups, 8 to 12 sets per week is the sweet spot. And if you go below that, you're probably undertraining. But if you go higher, you're just piling on fatigue that eats into your recovery instead of building muscle. And if you want to prioritize a specific muscle group, you can push towards the higher end of that range while keeping the rest at the lower end to avoid 2-hour sessions. The one thing though that matters is how you spread those sets. If you do all 10 in one session, the quality of each set drops as fatigue builds. By set 6 you're gassed and everything you do after that will just be junk volume. So I like to split those sets across at least 2 workouts per week to get the most out of every set. But you have to realize that the number of days matters way less than hitting that weekly volume and recovering properly between those sessions. So now we've covered technique, intensity and volume, but here's the thing. Treating them as 3 separate boxes to tick is exactly why you're struggling to get jacked. Because each one only works because the other 2. This is what I mean. If you have great technique, you dialed in the volume, but you miss the intensity, you're just exercising. You're going through the motions, but you're never sending a strong enough signal for your body to trigger muscle growth. Now, if you have high intensity and low volume with poor technique, that's the worst of them all. Because all that does is increase your risk of injury. And with good technique, intensity, but with too high or too low volume, you're either under or overtraining. See, each one of these is a piece of the puzzle. And a puzzle with a missing piece is never complete. But when all 3 lock in together, technique maximizes the effect of the exercise you do, while intensity and volume give your body the signal to grow. That's when the first pillar of the iron method is working. And now we need the other 3 to make sure your body can actually do something with that signal. Which brings me to the second pillar of the iron method. And it turns your training into growth. Look, you already know nutrition matters, but the internet has convinced you it's so complex that you end up obsessing over the wrong things. So I'm gonna make it super simple. Remember the graph? See, every time you train, you drop below baseline. And then your body kicks off the recovery process to bring you back above it. But that recovery process needs fuel. And that fuel is your nutrition. Without it, your body wants to adapt, but it can't. So let's break it down. Because nutrition really comes down to just 3 simple things. And once you know how to get them right, getting jacked is as simple as driving an automatic car. The first thing to get right is the amount of calories, as this is the energy that you need to have good, productive workouts. And your body needs it to fuel the recovery process. And while this sounds simple, almost every client that I start to work with doesn't get this right just yet. Take my client Michael, for example. When he started working with me, he'd been tracking his calories for years. He thought he knew exactly what he was eating, except he never tracked dinners with his girlfriend. And I get that. It's not very romantic to weigh every ingredient. It's impossible to get calories right if you just cook everything together and you split it up in uneven parts. But you don't need to get it accurate to the calorie. If that one meal of the day makes your life so much more enjoyable, you can accept some level of inaccuracy. But getting it 80% right is better than not tracking it at all. And so he started guesstimating those meals. And after a few days, he realized he was consuming way more than he thought he was. That one single meal he didn't think was that important was the exact reason he didn't get in shape he'd been working so hard for. Which brings us to the obvious question. How much should you actually be eating for muscle growth? I almost always recommend eating roughly 10% above your TDEE, which stands for Total Daily Energy Expenditure. And it's basically the amount of calories that you burn in a day. To find your exact number, use the calorie calculator in the description below. And if you run into the same problem as Michael did, my calorie calculator also has a cool AI meal scanner. You just take a picture of your plate and it instantly estimates the calories and macros for you. Where calories are what provides your body with the energy to build muscle, the second thing is possibly even more important. Because without it, your muscles can't grow. And I think you know what this is, right? It's protein. And I don't have to tell you how important protein is, but I still see so many guys come to me not getting enough of it. And honestly, I see this more often than I'd like. Take my former client Michel, for example. When he started working with me, he was training often and doing everything right. But his recovery was slow. He was constantly sore and never felt fully ready for the next workout. Then when we took a good look at his nutrition, he was eating roughly half the protein he needed. So we brought it up. And even just adding 20 or 30 grams of protein a day made a massive difference. His muscle soreness went from 2 to 3 days to just 1. And because he was showing up to each workout more recovered, he also started getting stronger. His body now finally had that raw material to actually force supercompensation. And the target is very simple. Aim for 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. Now research shows that anything above 1.6 grams works, but 2 is just a bit easier to calculate, and personally I've had better success with slightly higher protein. Now the third thing of the nutrition pillar is where I see too many people get confused. Because on social media I hear about all these different diets that are the best. Keto, paleo, Mediterranean diet, that's too many for me to remember. And the only difference between each of those is the ratio between carbs and fats. And what I see often is 2 things. Number 1, guys don't know what the perfect split between carbs and fats is. And 2, trying to hit the perfect ratio is so difficult, it's the single reason they can't stick to that diet. And the truth is, it doesn't actually matter. What matters is that you get enough calories and proteins in the first place, but also that you get enough fats, because fats are considered an essential macronutrient. Fats are not the enemy. In fact, they're needed for very important processes like the production of testosterone. But carbs, on the other hand, are non-essential macros. Your body can survive without those, but they are a direct source of energy that improves the quality of your workouts. More energy means better workouts, and so more stimulus, and more potential for muscle growth. So you want to be aiming for at least 1 gram of fat per kilogram of body weight per day. And once you've hit that, the rest of your calories can come from carbs. And if you go slightly over that fat minimum, don't worry about it. As long as you stay within your calorie target, you're fine. So now let's put this together using my own numbers. I currently weigh 81 to 82 kilos. Plug that into my calorie calculator, and it tells me that my maintenance calories is around 3,000 calories. That's what my body burns in a day. Now for muscle growth, I add that 10%, which brings me to a target of just over 3,300. Next is protein. So we do 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So that's around 165 grams. And because protein has 4 calories per gram, that's 660 calories just from protein. Next we do fats. It's 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. So that's around 80 grams for me. And because it has 9 calories per gram, that gives me 720 calories from fats. Next we calculate carbohydrates. And we do this by taking the total calories minus protein minus fats. So that means we have 1945 calories left over. And because carbs have 4 calories per gram like protein, I divide the leftover calories by 4, which gives me 485 grams of carbs per day. It's as simple as this, right? My total daily targets are just over 3,300 calories, 165 grams of protein, 80 grams of fat, and 485 of carbs. So now you have your calorie and macro targets, but just setting the right numbers won't get you the jacked physique you want. Because if you don't know what your weight should be doing week to week, you have no way of knowing you're actually gaining muscle. For muscle growth, we want to be gaining around 0.25 and 0.5% of your body weight per week. And for most people, that's a gain of 1 kilo or 2.5 pounds per month. If you stay below that, you're leaving muscle growth on the table. And if you go above it, you're gaining more fat than muscle. The most accurate way to track this is to weigh yourself every morning, first thing after your bathroom visit. But you don't want to react to single days, because body weight will fluctuate every single day. Instead, take your daily average across the week, and then adjust based on that data. If you're bang on in the middle of the range, you don't change anything, of course. If you're not gaining any weight, increase your calories by 10% until you are. And if you're gaining more than 1 kilo per month, you drop your calories by 10% until you're back in that range. Now, one thing to keep in mind though is that after any adjustment, give it at least a week before you react again, because body weight takes time to respond to a calorie change. Adjusting too quickly will just send you in circles. So far we've covered intensity and nutrition, and if you implement both, you're already ahead of 90% of other guys in the gym. But here's the thing, I've worked with guys who had their training dialed in, the nutrition on point, and yet they were still not growing the way they should. And almost every single time, it came down to just one thing: recovery. Everyone knows sleep is important, everyone knows stress is bad, but knowing it and actually prioritizing it are two very different things. And that gap between knowing and doing is exactly why a lot of you guys look the same as you did 6 months ago. So if you are serious about building the jacked physique, you need to take this as seriously as your training and your nutrition. And that's the part that most people sleep on. Yeah, pun intended. Now there's this one thing about sleep that blew my mind. And once I realized it, I couldn't ignore it anymore. You rarely fell asleep straight away, right? And some or every night you wake up for the bathroom, and even if you don't, there are so many natural wake events during the night that you don't even notice. My average awake time any night was between 1 and 1.5 hours, and I only realized this when I got myself this fitness and sleep tracker. And even on nights where I was in bed for 8 hours, my actual sleep was more like 6.5, sometimes even less, and I had no clue. because I felt fine. But that's the thing about poor sleep. You get so used to that baseline of low energy that it just becomes your normal. You sort of forget what it actually feels like to be properly rested. And the reason this matters so much for muscle growth is that the majority of recovery happens during your sleep. It's when your body does the work of rebuilding above that baseline we talked about. If we cut that short and the supercompensation is limited, or it doesn't even happen. And you know what? I can tell within the first set of a session whether one of my clients didn't get enough sleep. Whenever I notice a drop in their strength, the first question I ask is about their sleep. And 99% of the time the answer is, yep, I slept less than normal. So I'm not here to repeat what everyone else already told you. Instead of focusing on, oh, just go to bed earlier, here's the biggest levers you can pull to actually get more sleep without turning into a monk. First, no big meals in the last 2 hours before bed. No phones or screens 1 hour before that, but definitely not in bed. And going to sleep around the same time every night. Those 3 things alone don't just boost your overall mood throughout the day, they also make a noticeable difference to how fast you recover, how much your muscle you build as a result. But there's one more thing quietly working against your recovery that most people never even think about. And it's not your training or your nutrition, it's your stress levels. And here's why it's so underrated. When you're stressed, your body releases a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is a catabolic hormone, which means that instead of building muscle, it breaks it down. You can think of your nervous system like this. You have 2 lines, a lower baseline and an upper threshold. See, during the day, your stress levels move between those 2 lines. It rises as you work, you're thinking, you're dealing with problems. They're lower as you take a break. And that's normal and that's perfectly fine. But where it starts to become an issue is when stress pushes you above that upper line. Then that's when you go into fight or flight mode. And in that state, your body is detecting a threat. It releases cortisol to get you out of a dangerous situation it thinks you're in. In this state, your body isn't capable of building muscle because it's literally protecting you against that threat. So if you can make sure you don't enter that fight or flight mode too often, your body can spend more time and energy on the recovery and muscle building process. So how do you do that? I like to take these micro breaks to bring back stress levels before they hit the ceiling. And I kind of stole this idea from meditation. But instead of having to sit down for 10 minutes in a quiet room, you can do this anywhere, anytime. If you're walking to the bathroom, waiting in a queue at the supermarket, waiting for a traffic light, instead of reaching for your phone, just take 4 slow breaths. In for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4. Just slow your breathing down. That's it. It almost sounds too simple, but done consistently throughout the day, it keeps your nervous system from overcooking and gives your body the space it needs to recover, adapt, and build muscle. When your intensity, nutrition, and recovery are all dialed in, your body has everything it needs to complete that supercompensation cycle. But this last pillar is what takes all of that potential muscle growth and turns it into the jacked physique you're working so hard for. Now, most of you guys are experienced lifters. You train consistently, track your workouts, and so the goal is simple. Lift a little bit more weight or do 1 more rep than you did last time. And on its own, it's great. But there's one thing I constantly see ruining process. And that's when beating the logbook becomes the goal. Because you need to complete that last rep, you grind it out, and you sacrifice form just to beat your previous workout. But more reps with worse form isn't progress. The weight went up, but the stimulus went down. And remember what we covered earlier? Technique is the one thing that needs to stay consistent. Because without it, the muscle doesn't get as much attention as it should. See, progressive overload isn't something you chase. It's actually the result of doing everything right. And that's what the O in the iron method actually means. It's not a target to hit, but it's a signal that everything else you're doing is working. When your technique is locked in, your intensity is high, your nutrition is fueling your recovery, and your body is getting enough rest, getting stronger is inevitable. So instead of asking, how do I lift more? The right question to ask yourself is, am I doing everything right to make me stronger? But tracking your workouts and progressive overload only works if you have a system for actually progressing them. Otherwise, you're just collecting data, right? And the model that I use with all my clients is called double linear progression. And it's super simple. You pick a rep range. For compound movements like squats, bench press, rows, I use 6 to 10 reps. For isolations exercises like curls or lateral raises, I go for 10 to 15. And then you follow 2 rules. Rule number 1, increase your reps first. You pick a weight that gets you anywhere within that rep range. Then aim to increase reps with the same weight and same technique until you hit the top of the rep range. Then rule number 2 is adding weight. Once you hit the top of your range with clean technique, you add the smallest increment possible, which is usually 2.5 kgs. Then you reset and build the reps up again, and you repeat this endlessly. So now you have the exact system to get jacked so fast, people will think you're on steroids. But knowing the system is useless if you can't apply it to your body type without wasting months figuring out what works. And that's what my coaching program is for. I built the whole thing for you. I review your training footage every week, adjust your plan for you to keep you progressing. So if you want the physique your efforts deserve, click the link below and let's build that physique together. Now, the iron method works for every muscle group, but if you want to see exactly how I applied these principles to build massive biceps, then watch this video next. It took me 7 years to figure out, and you'll get it in 5 minutes.